had you on this podcast twice. The world won't know it. This is the second time.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for taking the time to
My
come
pleasure.
this morning. I really appreciate it. The first podcast, I did everything on it. I actually finished it together. I let you see a little bit of it. It was just the sound. And it was so much, I had so much pleasure talking with you the first time. I said, I can't do it like that. This one has to come out better.
Sure.
Listen, let's start off with where you were born, even though I know.
Sure. I was born in this farming community called Salinas. It's about 2 hours south of San Francisco. If you're familiar with Monterrey, it's in the Monterey Bay Area. I lived there until I was about 16. And when I was 16 was the first time I left home, and I came to Japan for the first time.
Okay, now I'm a little confused. Wait, you didn't stay in the same place. I think at 4 years old, you switched from mom to dad. Oh no, it's fourth grade.
No,
Right? See,
yeah.
wait a minute. Let's get back. No, you just gave me the part you give people you don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
Now I know you.
That's right.
And I've met your mom.
That's right.
In real time.
Yeah. So my parents, my parents separated when I was about 4.
Right.
And
That's
at
what
first, I was moving back and forth between my dad and my mom's house.
Right.
And then I started living with my mom up until I was in 4th grade, and then moved in with my dad.
Right.
And while I was younger, I was living all across the Monterey Bay Area. So Carmel Valley, Monterey, Pacific Grove, Salinas, Castroville, all these small little areas that
Because they were
bounced
moving.
around.
Your family was
My mom was moving around.
Oh, your mom was moving. Your dad stayed. Did he stay?
Yeah, like it's funny because like our family, we're part of this Swiss community that in the late 1800s immigrated as a village, basically, from this village in like southern Switzerland directly to Salinas. And we're related to a lot of the families that immigrated over at the same time because we're all like cousins, like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th generation cousins. And the house that my dad was living in at the time and that I kind of grew up in was the house that my great grandmother built. Like, so she came over, tough as nails woman, and she built the house, the farm/ranch house that I grew up in. And that's where my dad was always living. And so he was like very, very stable, very, very set, married to the land. My mom was always moving around, always checking things out, always looking for new experiences. Yeah.
Because I met your mom, and I believe she's just a little younger than me. Or maybe.
Yeah, she was quite young when I was born. She was 19.
Okay.
And so it's people confuse us as being like brother and sister, or
Easily. Easily,
or even like together
Right.
romantically, because she looks very, very young,
Yes.
and I'm like hitting that stride of
and
myself.
you're 6'5". I mean, come on,
Yeah.
your height too.
Yeah, big person. And so it looks like she does not look like, we do not look like mother and son.
No,
Yeah.
you don't. And she's really nice. She's such a nice woman. She's so pleasant.
Yeah.
She sat in the class when I was teaching your son, and she watched quietly. And she didn't stay all the way through. She said, "Okay, I got it."
Yeah.
And then she got it. Right.
Yeah, she's a very proud grandma.
I bet she is.
Yeah.
I bet she is. Does your brother have kids too?
Yeah, he's got 2 little girls. I should have stayed they're little, but they're in high school now.
Okay. So they're older than your kids.
Yeah, no, my brother got married much younger than I did. He got married when he was 21, and I got married when I was like 29.
Okay, and there's 2 years difference between the two.
Yeah, he's 2 years younger than me. So he was married when I was like 23, 24.
But you guys were always together, even when you left 4th grade to go with your father. He came too.
Yes.
Because you guys had to do chores together and everything. So you had to go through all this.
Oh man.
I like that. I like that part.
Yeah.
Wait, so when you were young, going with your mother, when you're going around with your mother to different places and stuff like that, did you feel, how did that make you feel when you're going from place to place? You had new friends every time, or what was it?
I think the first couple of times I did, and then I just kind of forgot how to make friends after a while, because the first couple of times it's a new experience, it's fun, it's everything else, but then after a while you sort of like, why should I try to make some friends? I'm just going to move again and not be able to see these people anymore. So you just stop trying. And so then it wasn't until I was back in middle school, I want to say, before I started like feeling comfortable enough to start making friends again.
Okay.
And then I had college, and I realized that, it's way more fun to be talking to everybody and being friendly with everybody than it is to be like quiet and sitting by yourself.
Well, you had a period where you were really quiet.
Yeah, I
Was it
would
in high
say.
school?
It was a little bit through high school, but it was more like elementary school and like the first part of middle school, because that's when I moved out from my mom's house into with my dad. And for me, it was just, it's one more move, because I had been moving around a lot until I was in second grade. Then I was at one school for basically 2 years, so second grade, third grade, half of fourth, and then suddenly I was in a new school again.
Right.
And so it was like, okay, this is really hard to try to make new friends every place that I go. And so then I just kind of stopped, and then I met some really good friends in middle school. We had similar interests. We liked to wrestle a lot. We liked to be goofballs. Like, we just had a lot of fun together. And I would say it was probably when I came to Japan the first time, everyone is just, especially because I was living in southern Japan in Yamaguchi prefecture, and most people hadn't really ever seen a non-Japanese person before. If they had,
as tall as you do.
Yeah, or if they had, it was related to the Marine base, because I was in Iwakuni. And so they had this big expectation of the way I was supposed to act and the way I was supposed to behave, and I didn't quite fit into that, because I'm a kid, right? I look like I'm 25, 23, or 25, 26, but I'm actually only 16.
Right.
And so having a lot of these expectations to behave a certain way, and just realizing, hey, if I just be funny and charming and nice, it really subverts a lot of these expectations, and people really enjoy that. And so that's kind of what helped make me realize that I should just be friendly again.
Yeah. Let's get back to when you were younger, because I like the parts we went through before. When you talked about being with your father, you and your brother went there. He lived in a pretty big area where the house that his mother made, basically.
His grandmother. His
grandmother.
Yeah.
Okay. And it actually was like a farm. It was
it was like a working ranch. It was more of a ranch than a farm. Okay. I mean, we grew some things on the property, but it's mostly for our own consumption. But in terms of animals we were raising, we had chickens, we had cows, we had 2 horses and a pony. Did I say a cow already? Pigs, rabbits, 3 dogs, 4 dogs, 15, 20 cats to take care of the mice problem. So we had lots of chores and work related to keeping this working ranch.
And you had to be consistent with those chores.
Yeah, I mean, animals don't care if you're sick.
That's right.
Like, it doesn't matter what other things that you've got going on, especially the way that we were doing things. Like, you have to take care of these animals. Like, they are dependent on you. Like, it's not like they're out to able to roam around all the time. Like, you have to feed them, you have to muck out the stables.
That's what I was going to say. The muck out the stables. You explained what that was, because I had never heard that before.
Yeah, you're literally like scooping up all the fecal matter and getting rid of it, so that way they're not sleeping. I mean, it's funny enough. Horses have a harder time keeping areas clean than pigs do. Pigs will have one little area that they do their business in, and they stay away from that area unless they're doing their business. Horses, it's just as they're walking along, they'll just let it go.
And people assume pigs are filthy, and they really aren't.
Yeah, well, that comes from this idea. Yeah, pigs are incredibly smart.
They're smarter than dogs. Yes.
We had this latch on the pig pen that we originally had the thing down here on the bottom, so all the kids could reach it and to go and feed the pigs and everything. The pigs were figuring out that if they kick or hit the gate with a snout a certain way, it would jiggle the lock and it could eventually open up and they could get out. So we had to move the latch to a sliding bolt latch and then place it on top, so that way the pigs couldn't do that anymore. Like, they're incredibly intelligent animals, and sometimes they have a sense of humor.
Right.
Yeah.
But you couldn't become too close with them, because you only had pets for basically slaughter.
Yeah. So so the pigs, we'd have the pigs like 3 to 4 months. Yeah. My brother made the mistake of naming one of the pigs once, and my grandfather was like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" One Christmas, he found out he was eating his piggy. He was traumatized.
I imagine you would be.
He didn't have. I think he swore off ham for like 4 years after that. Like, he just couldn't, because he never knew when he was going to be eating.
Did you ever get involved in any of the slaughtering?
No. Okay. Sorry. No. We had a family of distant cousins that were butchers, and so they would come and take away the pigs, and then couple of weeks later, we would get pounds of meat, ham, bacon, all the fixins from that slaughter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you told me you also learned to start driving when you were like 4 years old or something like that?
I don't know if I was that young.
You were young.
There's pictures of me in my dad's Jeep and everything else, because we would use this little beat up old Jeep to drive around to go, especially if one of the horses got out or something else like that. We would have to go chase it down, or if we were just going to go check things out. Like for my dad, it was like, okay, I don't want my kids watching TV all the time. Let's take them somewhere. And so we would get in this little Jeep and drive around the area.
That's amazing, yeah. And you said you also you never really hunted, but your father did.
Yeah, he took me hunting several times. And so I would go with him, but I never went and got my hunter license.
Okay.
So it's like I'm comfortable around guns. I've been around guns. I've done skeet shooting and things like that, but I never went and got my hunter's license.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said you only had big game like deer.
Yeah. So we hunted deer every August.
Right.
So the hunting season started if I remember correctly, the beginning of August, and goes until like the middle of September or something. And that's when my dad would always go hunting.
And you knew how to clean a deer. You know how to.
Yeah. So like I would be with him when he would do that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Just.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you do? Because I could do rabbits. Is
Yeah.
it basically the same? You cut the hooves.
Yep.
And you have to do the head, take the head off, and then boom, boom, and then the skin.
Yep.
Okay.
Pretty much the same thing. It's
Same thing.
pretty much the same thing. It's just
Just
scale.
bigger, just a
Yeah.
bigger version. Okay. Yeah, because I did that. In California, I used to hunt rabbits,
Okay.
cottontail and jackrabbits
Sure.
all the time, using shotguns, and you were using rifles.
Yeah.
They were different. All right, so growing up there, you said your father had the chores for you, and you told me that you guys would have to get home, you'd have to walk all the animals
Yeah. That.
before sunset.
So the horses, it was not as much of an issue with because they had open pasture. That was the other thing that we always had to do was building fences. Anyways, bad memory.
You told me you didn't like any of this.
Yeah, no, I was never. I mean, I grew up on a farm, but I didn't actually enjoy it.
So you didn't wait. So when your mother said you have to go with Dad now, you're gonna we're gonna go with you. We're gonna go
Please
with you.
please no, not the farm.
That was traumatic. We visit. We don't mind visiting, but you mean we're gonna deliver?
It was one of those things where it's like, I've built so many fences, and I don't mean like a small little picket fence. I mean like a 6 foot high fence that circles like an acre or 2 acres of property, and then we'd have to go build this. We'd have to go dig post holes to string up wire fencing for our pasture land, so that way we could let the horses run around and the cow run around. And so, like, you'd have plans for the weekend where you want to go with friends or you want to go somewhere, and then you're just like, no, we got a fence to build.
Did your sister have to work with you too? From your
No.
father, your father's
No.
next wife. 'Cause she was
No,
2
my
years younger, than the
steps-
same age
yeah.
as your brother. Yeah.
My stepsister had other chores that she had to do.
Inside chores.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, I don't want to make it sound like she had to do the inside stuff and the boys had to do
But
the
she
outside
did.
stuff.
But she
But that
did.
is kind of what happened.
But that's what's
Yeah.
wrong with that? You're
Yeah.
trying to be politically correct.
Yeah, it's just like,
situation.
huh?
Yeah, but
I'm
she
thinking
did.
about it. Well, no, I mean, so we shared like some of the muckraking stuff. So like she did some of that.
Did she?
Yeah, but she didn't have to do the things like mowing the lawns.
Or may build fences and stuff like that.
Correct.
Something
Like
like
yeah.
that.
So, but when it came time to like weeding all the flowers and everything else, she had to get down and do all that. Like, so there was just different things. If it was something that was like raw strength, of course, she was not doing that. But if it was, there was other things that were outside that did not require you to lift up a 20-pound bag of cement or.
And they weren't dangerous. They weren't really dangerous either.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So your brother and you were together all the time doing these things. So you guys had a lot of communication and had to work out stuff to make it right. You couldn't be upset with each other too much.
Yeah, that's true.
You didn't have time to be.
Yeah, no, we were too
Job-
tired. It was.
Right.
It was, and then now that you mention it, I have this feeling. I suddenly have the suspicion that when my brother and I started fighting, suddenly there was a lot more chores.
It was what?
There was suddenly a lot more chores whenever my brother and I started fighting.
Isn't that interesting?
Like,
Yeah, it's right. There you
I'm
go.
now questioning this. Like, I gotta like talk to my brother about this now. But I suddenly have this thought that we probably had a lot more chores like when we started fighting.
Yeah. And you knew that you wouldn't be able to discuss anything, but you wanted to get out your system.
Yeah.
And you were mad about the chores more than you were each other.
Exactly. And I mean, because my brother and I, we did fight a lot because we were so close in age and our birthdays were a day apart. And we had to do a lot of things together. And so like we were always just stepping on each other's toes. And I'm also this really dominating personality. Like I kind of just swoop in and take charge of everything. And I think there's some times where he kind of appreciated it, but then there was a lot of times he probably didn't appreciate it. And so, like brothers growing up, we just had conflict. And I do remember my dad coming down on us several times. It was like, if you guys can't figure out how to get along, things are going to change a lot around here. And so for example, like he was going to cancel my trip to Japan.
Okay. That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, it was like, okay. So, and my brother had this evil look in his eye. He's like, oh, you can't do anything now.
He knew. He knew. He said, Dad got you good on this one.
No, he did some things. He did some things.
My goodness.
Yeah, and then we had to and then my dad came down on him for something else separate, and so it was
so ego became a little bit.
Yeah, because my dad kind of started to realize very quickly that I was like too afraid to do anything about it, but I was going insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's neat. He wasn't it your grandfather who encouraged you to go to Japan?
Yeah, my grandfather is kind of like the saving grace for my life, I would have to say. Like my parents.
And this is your father's.
Yeah, my father's father. My grandfather was always there whenever I needed him, and I mean that. Like he and my grandmother both, like they took care of me and my brother when we were really young because my parents were really young and then they would get fighting a lot and getting a divorce. So my grandmother would take us to the movies.
Isn't your father quite older than your mother?
No, he's only 2 years older.
Only 2 years older?
Yeah, so he was 21, she was 19.
Oh, wait, but that was your grandfather who passed away at 96.
Yes, that's correct.
Your father's still living?
Yeah, my father's still alive. Yeah, he lives in Tennessee.
Oh, that's good, that's good.
Yeah, so when I was much younger, my grandfather and my grandmother stepped in a lot to help take care of my brother and I. And I was kind of like my grandfather's favorite also. So
you're his first grandchild.
Yeah, and and we have this thing in our family where we share all the middle names. So both my dad and my grandfather have the same name, Donald Joseph Jacop. And my grandfather was actually really upset that I wasn't Donald Joseph Jacop III. He wanted me to carry on that name because.
But you didn't?
No, so my middle name is Joseph though. So Joseph goes back to our great-great-grandfather that came over from Switzerland. And then my grandfather has a middle name, my dad has that middle name, I have that middle name, my son has that middle name.
Okay, but why aren't you the third?
Because my mom wanted to name me Bryan.
Ah.
Yeah.
So grandpa didn't like your mom so much.
No, I mean, they got along. I mean, she was part of the family, but the one thing, he was like, he's kind of told her, he's like, you should have been a third.
And he would let that go. He never let that go.
He never let that go. I heard that so many times. It's just like, we'd be driving somewhere, and all of a sudden, you should have been a third. I'm like, what? What are you talking about, Grandpa? Like, what is this?
You should have been a third.
Yeah. Yeah, but when I was growing up, like, him and my grandpa, like I said, like my grandmother taught me to read. And so when I went into kindergarten, I could already read.
She took you and your brother?
Yeah. And so, because we spent a lot of time at their house, my grandfather would record stuff on TV from Disney to show it to us and play it for us all the time. My grandmother was always making food for us and helping take care of us. And then when I decided that I wanted to study abroad, my grandfather really supported it. And I remember he picked me up to take me home from school one day. And I was telling him, I was like, hey, could you drop me off at the mall, actually, because I want to go get some job applications. And he's like, you're a sophomore in high school. Like, what do you need a job for? Like, you have chores at home. Like, what are you thinking? And I was like, no, I want to save up money so I can go do a study abroad program. And he's like, you're going to go get a job so you can save money to go to a different country to study? That's your big goal? Like, not a car? Like, you wanted to do a study abroad program? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay. So he went home, made a few phone calls, and then found out about a Rotary Exchange program. And then he encouraged me to apply for a Rotary Exchange program. And I got a scholarship to come study abroad in Japan. And it was because of him. Like, he really encouraged it. He, set up, like, he helped put me in touch with all the people that were going to help me do that program.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know you and your grandpa were real tight.
Yeah, I mean, my family has a cabin in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's a little bit north of Yosemite, south of Lake Tahoe. This place called Twain Harte. It's beautiful. I was going up there. My grandparents built a cabin up there back in the late 60s. And, excuse me. So I spent a lot of my years every year, I was there multiple times a year, skiing in the winter, swimming in the summer. And every time we were there, we'd play dominoes or double deck or some other kind of card game with my grandfather. And whenever he won, it was shooting fish in a barrel. It was his favorite thing to say. And he yelled out too, so everyone could hear. Oh, shooting fish in a barrel. And you just sit there because you're just like fuming, right? And then you whoop him, and you're like, oh, so that's what shooting fish in a barrel feels like. That's not the same thing.
Was he tall as well?
No, he was actually very small. But my height comes from my mom's side of the family.
Okay.
Because my mom's side of the family is mostly Norwegian.
All right.
My grandfather, I want to say he was about 5'8", 5'9".
So you're taller than your father as well?
Yeah, I was taller than my dad, about 14, 15. He did not like that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he was just like, this is not going well.
This is not good. This is not good.
He was really upset when I
Well,
was at the
mother
same
and father, is he taller than your mother?
Yeah.
He's a little bit taller, okay.
Yeah, so I want to say my dad is about 5'10".
Okay.
I'm actually really not good with height, so I think my mom is somewhere between 5'6" and 5'8", I want to say.
Yeah.
So my dad was taller than that, but what we didn't realize, because when my mom met my dad, her family was back in Boulder, Colorado. We didn't realize that even how tall I am, because I'm a little bit taller than my brother. We're short compared to the men on that side of the family. My uncle, my mom's little brother, was like 6'6", 6'7". I'm 6'5". My grandfather was like 6'8", 6'9".
So your father didn't know any of this?
Yeah, we had no idea.
He didn't
And so,
know.
yeah, no, I mean that was the funniest thing is like, finding out that, hey, you're the short one of the family.
She's the short one of the family.
And I'm
yeah.
like,
going out.
I ain't never heard that before. What that mean? Like, what? No, I'm not the short one. No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet her side of the family?
I talked to them on Facebook.
Oh, you haven't met them in person?
Yeah, they're in the Midwest.
Okay.
And my mom's little brother actually passed away like 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Was it her only sibling?
No, she has a sister as well. And we don't talk about that one.
Okay. Is she older or younger?
Yeah. My mom is the middle, so that's
okay, so
older.
she's older. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you went through everything. Okay, so you finally get to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the first time you came here, you were 16.
Yeah.
All right. So what happened? How was that? What was that like?
That was a really amazing experience, and it was funny because coming from Salinas into Iwakuni is like coming from like a small rural community into a city. And it was really funny because like I thought I knew what I was getting myself into, and I of course had no idea because I was treated as if I was an actual Japanese student, so I had to go to regular Japanese classes, wear the uniform, behave the same way that any other 16-year-old would behave. But I didn't really speak the language at the time. It was hard for me to really understand what was happening, what was going on. And then because I looked like I was so much taller and bigger than I actually was, people just assumed that I would know what to do and how to behave. Because they're like, oh, this is a young man. This is a 25-year-old. This is a guy who's significantly older. And I'm like, hey, I'm 16. I'm a boy still. Like, I'm still figuring stuff out. And I got really lucky when I was in Yamaguchi because I have this Japanese father, this family, like my last host family. I had 5 different host families. The last family like really went out of their way to treat me like I was part of their family. And it's largely because of my Japanese mom. Like she was really pushing her husband to treat me as part of the family and to welcome me and be like, hey, imagine if this is our son.
How many kids did they have?
They had 2. They've since had a third, but they had 2 at the time.
How old were they?
They were like 8 and 9. Yeah, so they were like significantly younger.
Okay.
And so at the time, it was like the mom was really pushing the dad to be very welcoming and to like treat me like their son. And at first the dad was really resistant to it, but then over time, he's like, let's do this. And we became very, very close because we would take out the dictionary and try to talk to each other about chivalry and giryong and being respectful, being polite, how to have manners, like what you're trying to do, and what that means, and how do you show respect in one country versus another country. I remember like this all started one night because I had just gotten to their house. This is my fifth experience, and we were all just watching TV together, and I just zoned out because I'm used to not really interacting with the host family that I'm with, or eating separately or something else like that. And so they try to talk to me, and I'm not really paying attention because why would I at this stage? And they turn off the TV, and the dad just yells at me, just like, what are you doing? Like, you're coming into our house, you're a guest in our house, my wife has made you a special meal, and you're not even talking to us. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, thank you for telling me. He's like, wait, I'm yelling at you and you're saying thank you for this? And I'm like, yeah, like I'm trying to learn. No one's talking to me about what I'm doing wrong. I'm just trying to guess and figure it out. You're the first person to actually tell me. He's like, what? He's like, you want to learn? I'm like, yes. I flew all the way here from California to learn about Japan and Japanese culture and the language. He's like, okay. He gets out of the dictionary, so we just start talking. And every night for like 3-4 hours around dinner time, we would have conversations.
How long did that last?
3 months, 4 months.
Because you only here for a short time.
Yeah, it was about three months, I want to say. And it was just everything and it immediately made this amazing positive impact on my life in Japan, because suddenly they understood what was going on in my head. And they could have an understanding of the things that I was struggling with, what I wasn't understanding, why I was behaving certain ways. And then they could be like, oh, well, actually, if you do that, it's kind of a little bit rude. What you want to do instead is this, because you're trying to communicate this message. They're not going to hear it if you act this way. So act this way. Like if you change the way that you deliver the message, it changes the way that it's received, and everyone will just be so much more grateful. And sure enough, by starting to do that, it suddenly went from, oh, we're really stressed out that Brian's here, we're not sure what he understands, to like, oh, we can actually have a conversation with Brian.
How long did it take? You were there only 3 months.
Yeah, so this is the last family. So I'd already could kind of speak Japanese.
How many families? Wait, last family. How many families did you find in what? 3 months?
No, so I was in Japan for a year.
Okay.
And so the first 4 families, it was like 1.5 to 2 months per family.
Right.
This last family was 3.
Right. Okay.
And so by about the 6-month mark, I could badly communicate in Japanese. Because I was on the train every day to go to school, studying Japanese as quickly as possible. Some of the teachers were helping me learn Japanese. And that was the other really great thing about my experience is, in addition to this family, there was a bunch of people at the high school that I was going to, or just in the community, that were really trying to volunteer and help me learn Japanese and get myself to be able to communicate. And this is one of the reasons why I like to volunteer so much, because I benefited so much from the generosity of people in Yamaguchi.
But something you have to be careful about that you're not mentioning, and I don't know why you're leaving it out this time. Yeah, they wanted to benefit you, they wanted to help you, but they were young girls.
Oh.
And they were,
I wasn't there yet. I wasn't there. I was getting there.
So I'm wondering why this 5th family didn't tell you that you were going, no, what? So I want to know, the 6'5" guy is going to go, no, and doing everything the women would do, because you didn't know there was a difference between the two, and you were just, those were the girls, only people really talking to you at school.
Yeah, so
was that year too?
That was that year. And I think it's because, like, when I was learning Japanese at the time, I was a massive mimic. So if I started talking with my host dad, I would immediately start adopting his mannerisms, his speech patterns.
So he didn't know.
I think he had some kind of idea, because when I'm talking just by myself, I would talk simplistically. When I'm talking with my host brothers, I would speak like them. When I'm speaking to my host mom, it would be like her. Right. I would just kind of mirror. But then when I'm by myself and have no one else to mimic, or I'm just talking, pulling it from memory, it would default to sounding like a 16-year-old Japanese girl.
Because that's who you had fun with, and who you see more
casual. People who would talk to me.
That's right.
Yeah, and so that was what I found out, like leaving Japan, going back home, finishing high school, starting college, and then coming back to Japan. When I was in university the first year, my Japanese friends thought it was hilarious because there's this giant guy that can speak Japanese, but he sounds like a 16-year-old girl when he does it.
That's when you came back here?
This is the year before I came back here.
You're in the States?
I'm in the States. So
and your Japanese friends there?
Yeah. So I went to University of the Pacific for my undergrad, and the Japanese cats that I had met at the university, they were like laughing. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. They're just like, it's amazing that you can speak Japanese, but your Japanese is so funny. Because like you sound like a 16-year-old girl. Like, this is hilarious.
And the gestures and everything.
Yeah, just the whole. I've forgotten how to do it now, but it was just like.
Stop it.
Yeah. Or something would happen. You're like, ooh. the whole thing, man. It was horrible.
But you were being serious, and you thought they would really take it seriously.
Because for me, it's like I didn't know enough to know what I was doing. The way that I was learning languages is I didn't have a lot of formal instruction in learning Japanese. Like, I had people volunteer and try to teach me some stuff or give me textbooks, but I didn't have a professional Japanese teacher sit me down and actually teach me Japanese. And so a lot of it was from context, like what did I see in the movies, what did I see on TV, what do I talk to my friends about? That was way more about the way that I learned Japanese than it was what I studied in a textbook. And this is why when I speak Japanese now, I have a really good accent, because I learned Japanese by speaking. And it took a long time for me to learn about grammar. It took me a long time to learn about particles and tenses and all these other things, because I didn't have this formal education for Japanese. I was lucky enough to come to Japan when I was 16, had a lot of people try to teach me as much as they could, and go to a Japanese high school, and that's how I would learn Japanese.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to get out of those habits? Because habits usually don't die easily.
Yeah, and this is actually something else that I'm studying right now. It's fascinating. It's like replacing habits and replacing neural pathways and things, the way that you think and the way that you react to stimuli. And it's more about replacing it with something else. So when I went to college in Japan, I was at Kansai Gakuin University, which is in Kansai, obviously by the name. And I made it a mission to learn Kansai-men. I wanted to speak like someone who was born and raised in Osaka. And so like really paid a lot of attention to the way locals spoke, bought like the books on how to speak Kansai dialect, and I just started integrating those speech patterns into my everyday Japanese. And so instead of trying to like stop cold turkey and create a new behavior pattern, I just replaced the behavior patterns with new ones that were more appropriate for the environment that I was in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And did you think you'd always be in Kansai, or?
Yeah, I didn't know.
You never thought.
Yeah,
you knew there were different dialects though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, when I was fresh in Japan, like I had like this Yamaguchi / Hiroshima Ben style of speaking, because I was learning from very local people from Yamaguchi prefecture. So even from that stage, I understood about dialects. That was one of the conversations that my Japanese dad and I had one night, was just understanding that, hey, in Japan, it's very mountainous. People have developed different ways of speaking, like very strong different ways of speaking that we don't have in the US. We have regional accents, but not to the level of dialects, right?
I think we do.
Okay.
Because you go to Appalachian Mountains, you go to the South, you go to
Fair.
North, so we do.
Okay.
I mean, probably even more, some places you probably go down, what they're trying to say. You go down to Louisiana, you wouldn't know what they're saying. Do you see what I'm talking about?
I stand corrected, sir. I stand corrected. Yeah,
that's very diverse down there.
Okay, I stand corrected.
But I can understand your love and appreciation for the diversity here, because a lot of people think as Japan, it's really being non-diverse of just one type of people. It is so diverse. They isolated and convinced over their 200 years of isolation they convinced everyone that they were one race.
Mm-hmm.
And they're diverse in looks and everything else.
And this is the thing that I was really astonished by when I moved to Tokyo. Because I first went to Kansai when I was 19, and then most of all my trips after that were always back to Kansai. When I tried to do like a consulting gig, when I first tried to move to Japan back in 2005, it was Kansai. My best friend from college lives in Kansai, and so I'm like always coming back, always going down to Kansai, whether it was Kobe or whether it was Osaka. That's where I was always trying to be until I moved here with my family. And we moved to Tokyo because that's where the jobs are, that's where the work is, that's where we're gonna be able to have a good life. And I was just amazed at how different Tokyo is compared to Kansai.
How so? Tell me the difference.
There's how do I say this? A coldness. Not from the perspective of people are unfriendly or uncaring or unsympathetic or rude. It's just the best way I can think about it is like the difference between San Francisco and New York. There's a seriousness and walls up between people that are in Tokyo that don't really exist in Kansai. Everyone's warm, everyone's curious, everyone really wants to laugh. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to be best friends with everybody, but there's more of this warmth that you get on the casual meeting with someone in Kansai that you don't get. Like, I can walk into any restaurant and they're going to be like, oh gosh, what do we do? How do we? Well, he's got to be able to speak Japanese. And so they just come up and just talk to you in Japanese. So instead of being nervous, instead of being shy and maybe being like uncomfortable and not showing how to approach, they're brash and just will come up right up to you and they would just talk to you in Japanese. And they're like, as long as you can speak Japanese, you're fine. And then the moment you speak Japanese, all of a sudden everyone wants to come over and talk to you. They're like, "Oh, where are you from? Like, what brought you here? Like, what do you think about Kansai?" It's this openness. I think that's a better term: openness versus closeness. It's not saying that Tokyo people are not friendly or welcoming or anything like that, but it's just there's more of a barrier to get through. And once you're there, all those things are there.
I think one thing that brings that on too is that Tokyo's filled full of transients.
Yeah,
People
exactly.
aren't from Tokyo.
Yeah.
The people that are in Tokyo, for the most part, aren't from here.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get their bearings. And that's why they're a little more hesitant to come out. But when you go to Kansai, they're from there.
Yeah.
Wherever you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not planning on leaving.
Yeah. No, like no.
And that's why they come, you're on my turf now.
Wait, and that's something that I hear when I go to work meetings and everything else. Someone from Tokyo will be saying, "Well, we do this, this, and this in Tokyo," and the response is always, "This isn't Tokyo." It's like, you're not in Tokyo now, buddy. Yeah, this is Osaka. Come on now, come correct, please.
That's right.
Yeah.
The thing I liked about it, I mean, the way I set up the regions when I had the medical equipment business, and now I ride my motorcycle all over Japan.
Mm-hmm.
In the north, they're very, very warm.
Mm-hmm.
Hokkaido, Aomori, that area, northern Honshu. Then when you get south, they tend to be straightforward, especially Kansai.
Yeah.
They're straightforward. In other words, Tokyo, the last thing they'll talk about when you're negotiating is money.
Mm-hmm.
That's the last thing. Kansai is the first thing they want to know. How much?
Yeah.
They say, how much?
Yeah.
How much is it gonna be? How much we're gonna make?
Yeah.
How much you gonna charge me? Whatever it's gonna be, they'll come straight at you, and that's a shock coming from here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the last thing to talk about, and they don't do that so much as you go north either. They're just very quiet and calm, but that's in the back of their mind.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. But you go to Kansai, no joke, they'll ask you in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That first discussion is not going to be third, fifth, or anything like that. It's going to be the first discussion.
100%.
You want to get that out the way.
Yeah. 100%.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's.
And the food's good. I love the food in Osaka. Kansai food is so good. They're not afraid to mix it up.
No, they're not.
You know what I mean?
Or,
I love that area. I do. Yeah. And I think because they think they're not Tokyo, so they try harder. The girls dress fancier, the guys jack the curls. You know what I mean? They have a little bit of bling to them that you never have here. They're not modest about how they dress.
I think that's a good way to put it. It's a different set of style. Tokyo, everything's prim, well coiffed, like very thoughtful. Some of it's very nuanced and some of it's very subtle. In Kansai, it's not meant to be subtle. It's like, no.
The rim red is red.
Yeah, it's like, I'm made of stardust and you're going to see me when I walk by.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, so.
And I like that too. There's a big difference in the two. So, needless to say, you're a big fan of Kansai.
I do.
That's where your heart is.
Yeah. If there was a way to live in Kansai and have access to everything here in Tokyo, I would in a heartbeat. I think my wife is not as much of a fan of Kansai as I am.
Where is she from?
She's from Hiroshima.
Hiroshima, okay.
Yeah. But she went to school up here in Tokyo. And she also understands that for her and for the kids and for everything else, access to international schools and programs and everything else, Tokyo is just a better fit for the family. But if I could, I would want to live in Kansai.
Is that something? So how much longer do you think you're going to be in Japan? You've been here how long total? All your time?
All my time together, probably about 6-7 years.
Okay.
But it's hard to track because since I was 16, once a year for some amount of time I was in Japan. And that could be anything from like 2 weeks to visit people to 6 months or a year for some kind of extended stay program. And I only took a break right after I was married because not right after I was married, right after our kids were born, because I was sending my wife and kids to Japan all the time. And so there was 3 or 4 years where I didn't come to Japan at all.
You just sent them?
I just sent them because I was working in startups. I was in Silicon Valley, so I was doing lots of small projects where I had to be on call all the time, or I had to be in the office all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we're living in Japan almost 4 years since we moved to Tokyo. How much longer we'll be here? That's kind of the question that we're working through right now. Originally, I wanted to move to Europe after this because I love Europe. Would love to.
Where in Europe?
Maybe Amsterdam.
Okay.
Yeah, the city's just absolutely gorgeous.
It is.
It's very easy to live and for Americans, and they have a really strong interest in Japan and the U.S. And so I was always thinking that, hey, Amsterdam would be great. If we move to the European Union, kiddos get residency, they can go to any university in Europe that they want to, be almost free. So in terms of education and everything else, and we're not talking about small local community colleges, we're talking about top tier European universities. And so that was the original plan. But I was talking to a friend of mine like 2 weeks ago, and he was saying that like, hey, like your marketability is really strong in Japan. Like you have this really amazing skill set, really unique knowledge base and abilities. Like if you go leave Japan, like, yeah, you still have an amazing ability set, but you're going away from like your seat of power. And so your potential to earn, your potential to do great things won't be gone, but you're where you should be. And so he kind of hit me with that, and that's been kind of rumbling around in my brain. Wow. So we're weighing everything. I think my wife also, she's happy in Tokyo, but she might also, like at first she was kind of resistant to the idea of moving to Europe, but now I think she kind of likes the idea of moving to Europe. So there's a lot of things for us to think about.
That's right, but your kids are still young though.
Yeah, so we have time.
Right.
Like we weren't planning on leaving Japan until they were in like high school.
Okay, so it'll be another 5 years or so?
Yeah, at least. Because I was telling my wife before we moved over here that at least I'll give you somewhere between 5 to 10 years, we'll live in Tokyo. And that looks like we'll be coming to that decision pretty soon. So,
What'd you study when you were in college? What'd you graduate?
International relations.
International relations.
With a focus on global economics.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you doing anything in that area? Not at all?
Not at all.
Did you want to? Or was that just a subject that you could graduate with?
Good question. I misunderstood. So the downside to my Japan trip was that I went my junior year.
You did what?
I went to Japan
my
junior year. And that's the year where apparently you learn about what it is to go to college, what the different majors mean and everything else. So I literally came back from my program, and I had been back in the country for about 2 weeks, go see my guidance counselor, and he says, you have a month to take the SATs and to choose your university if you want to go to university next year. Like you're way behind everybody else in terms of going to university. It's like, I'm assuming you're going to university because you're a smart kid. And I'm like, what? I've got to do what? So rushed and took the SATs, the SATs, did pretty well, because I literally had like a week to study. And, you know, I got like a 1300. I don't even remember what that means. I just remember, I was talking with some friends about that, and they're like, you got a 1300 on the SATs without studying? And I'm like, I don't know, what did you get? Like, I didn't have the context, because it was one of those things where it was just like, I missed what all of these things mean.
Right, I understand.
And so when I was talking to my guidance counselor, he's like, okay, well, with your scores, you can choose, you can apply to any of these schools. Like you kind of have a choice of what school that you want to go to.
But in these fields?
Well, because I wanted to go to an international program.
Okay.
Because I was thinking, like, I want to learn about international business. I want to start a company. Like, those are the things that I want to do. And he heard international programs, so he brought out all the schools that have international relations, international, like some kind of international study. I didn't realize that when he said international relations, he meant international politics. And once again, going to Japan, I went this time to Japan my sophomore year of university. So where you're supposed to be getting your feet underneath you and understanding what you're studying and everything else, I was in Japan. So then I come back and I go up to the dean, because the international program at UOP was very small, so there's only about 20, 30 kids in each graduating class. And I go up to the dean and I was like, so now that I'm a third year and I've got all these classes that I took in Japan and my credits are looking really good, I'm looking at the syllabus and for the required classes, I don't see anything for business. Like, where are the business classes? Like, when am I going to learn about international trade? When am I going to learn about marketing? Like, those are the things I really want to learn about. And she's just like, that's the business school, honey. Like, this is international relations. Like, she's like, how do you not know? Oh yeah, you were gone. Mm-hmm. Like, it was one of those things where it was like,
wow, you in your junior year now.
Yeah, I was in my junior year. And to the school's credit, they immediately reached out to the business school and said, hey, we have some international studies majors that are really interested in international business. What classes do you guys have that these students can take that maybe we can partner on? So there was an official partnership between the international school and the business school where they started putting on programs for us. So like, I don't want to say that my dean or the school was unsupportive. The moment they saw that the need, they made something happen. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very grateful for that. And so I started studying international business, but of course it was like, it wasn't even enough to get a minor in business. It was basic information. And so when I graduated, because of all the credits that I had a degree in global economic relations and Japanese, and I was about 10 credits shy of a third degree in Chinese study. Just because I was always studying. I was always thinking like, oh, I can take 18 units. I'm gonna take 18 units because I'm gonna get my money's worth. Like, this is not a cheap school. Like, no, give me all the knowledge you can. And so when I graduated, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, so I have this international relations degree. What jobs are available? And they're like, oh, jobs? No. Grad school is what's available to you. Once you have your master's or your PhD, then we can talk about jobs. Or you can go into the foreign service or something like that. And so at the time when I graduated, this was 2003, so it was right after 9/11. So interest in Japan wasn't really needed on the global stage. Not so much that the US didn't care about Japan, but people were way more interested in, hey, do you speak Farsi? Do you have some knowledge about the Middle East? Or do you speak Korean? How good is your Korean? Do you understand how well do you understand the politics between North and South Korea? Those were areas that were much more interested in, that people were looking for even undergraduate people to come and work for the Foreign Service. And so, instead I went into banking. I was like, my girlfriend at the time, her cousin worked at a bank, and he's like, yeah, I'll give you a job. And so I went and interviewed, and I got into banking for the first 8 years of my career. And I was miserable.
You couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
What about it did you not like?
There was just this, it's not shallowness. I spent like 4 years of my life, or not 4 years, I spent a lot of my life doing really big things that no one thought I could do. Having really big discussions about really meaningful things related to history, related to where we come from, where we're going. And in banking, none of that was really important. It's about the size of the accounts that you're managing. It's about the money that you can make for your clients. And for me, I just struggled with that so much. It was not something I went to school for. I still don't really understand finance. And so trying to learn how to do this was just really, really hard for me. And so I would say almost within the first 6 months of my wife and I being married, I transitioned out of banking into gaming. I got a job working for Cyber Agent America. I was the first local hire to help build out their sales team. And so got into gaming, started learning about ad tech, started learning about tech, started learning about storytelling and marketing in the digital stage. And this is right when the major digital revolution was happening in terms of advertising and in terms of mobile ads and the way and tracking and how to promote products, how to catch people's attention, how to do it in a non-invasive way, how to do it in a non-sleazy kind of way. So I had this amazing education by look of where I was working.
That was neat. How long did you do that? You said the first 8 years you were in the banking.
Yep.
And then after that you went to the gaming sector.
Yep.
How long did that last?
Between gaming and mobile advertising, it was probably up until I was about 36, 37.
Okay.
So that was about 8-9 years.
8-9 years.
And then I had started my own consulting firm when my son was born. And they'd been running in the background, just doing small little things here and there, small little projects or coaching things. And that had been going on for 4 years. And then I just decided to go full time with my own business. And found out that I really loved working for myself. Really liked pushing on things, really liked being able to be a consultant and share my expertise and share my knowledge with clients and help them be successful.
And that's what you're doing now?
Yeah.
What's the name of your company?
Located.
Located?
Mm-hmm. My life has been amazing because I've benefited from the kindness and generosity of so many people. That's so right. If I can help in small ways here and there.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. You have a vast reservoir of information. That's why you're so active here in the club.
Yeah.
And you do a lot of stuff here too. So I see you in
every
magazine. My goodness, every In Touch magazine we have, you're in there doing something. You're involved.
Yeah, I've always liked to be this also goes back to my grandfather. He was very involved in the community. He volunteered at the rodeo. He volunteered at the Salinas Air Show. He volunteered for the ski patrol. He was always involved in something wherever he was to provide. He volunteered at the hospital. Just anything that he could do to help benefit the community, he was a part of. And I think for my wife and I, tech has really become our community for us. Our kids come to classes. You teach my son. My wife is getting involved in fitness classes and yoga and stuff. I'm obviously here almost every day. And because of that, I want to volunteer. I want to help do things to make tech fun, interesting, and engaging. That's why I volunteer with the CCEC to help put on really interesting events, to help.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
You're doing a really good job. You're working with Drew, you work with Matthew, who's over the CC.
Yeah, he's the chair.
He's the chair. You guys work together. I see you in meetings. Every time I'm here, it seems like you guys are always in meetings somewhere, because I use the club as if it's still mine. And I'm not shy about it either.
Yeah.
No. Before I end the podcast, Bryan, I always ask this question.
Sure.
If you had a magic wand, you could go back in time with the knowledge you have now, and you could meet a younger Bryan, what would you tell him, and how old would that Bryan be?
If I had a magic wand and could go back, I probably would have gone to Bryan fresh out of college and told him, hey, your story's just beginning, in the best possible way. There are no rules that you have to follow, because I think this is one of the things that I had forgotten when I graduated college because I had to go into banking and I was kind of really disappointed. Like I lived this international life. I'd been abroad when I was 16. Most people that I knew, even in San Francisco, still didn't have their own passport. And I had broken all these rules, and then suddenly I was in banking in San Francisco, no options for international travel or not international relocation or international work projects. And I would just tell him, it's like, hey, you got this far by breaking all the rules. Don't suddenly now start feeling like you have to follow the rules. Start your own business. Like pushing myself to kind of start that journey that I did when I was in my mid-30s, when I was in my mid-20s. I think that is what I would have done. That's kind of what I would do, because how much progress, how amazing things have gone, in my 30s when I started focusing on, taking care of my family. And that was a big thing too, is like once I got married to my wife and raising the family, like there was a big inspiration for me to work harder and to gain more gains. And if I had started that sooner, I'm really curious to see where I'd be now. I'm happy where I am, but I've got a lot more growing to do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, as always.
I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And remember, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars, because you're too blessed to be stressed.